may recognize these two characters who have formed a brand new band called Envy of None. And please welcome to Streaming for Vengeance, a couple of Canadian hard rock legends, Mr. Alex Lifeson and Mr. Andy Curran. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Now, I don't know, Mike, my first question is, why aren't we doing this at my brewery, Henderson? Because you can't drink all day unless you start in the morning. So why not?
Good commercial for the beer. Get the beer can right
Absolutely.
up there.
Yeah, right there.
There you go.
Anyways, no masks are coming up, and a lot of bands have been weathering this long, long storm by being creative. And you guys have certainly been creative. So talk about the struggles or I talked to some people that have I haven't even heard about this pandemic because my head has been in the studio for a year and a half.
Well, I don't think you can avoid it, but for us, this past year has been very productive. We've been working on the record mostly in the past year, even though it started 4 or 5 years ago, the seeds of this whole project. But we've been sharing files. We haven't been in a room together working. We share files and keep updating them, and they go round until we are happy with whatever we set out to do with these songs. And it doesn't follow any particular concept or pattern. There's lots of variety on the record in terms of musical character, from country and Western to pop to Europop to industrial and some rock stuff. So it's a really interesting palette, I think, of material.
Now, so people expecting like a rock and roll ride are really going to be up for a pleasant surprise, we hope. Because there's a lot more depth into this thing.
I think so, Tim. You know, I think one thing, and I can speak on behalf of Alex because we've mentioned this on other interviews or spoken about it. It was quite liberating for the two of us not to go down the obvious path. Caromings like that. Sorry about that. So that part of it we found pretty rewarding to actually stretch outside and open the blinders a little bit.
Now, a lot of bands really paint themselves inside their little corner. So how easy was it for you to kind of walk out of that headspace?
Well, there were no expectations. We weren't trying to escape anything or change anything or go in a different direction just for the sake of that. It was organic. We are 4 songwriters who got together to make a record. What started out as possibly an EP of a few songs turned into a full album of a dozen songs, and there were no, as they said, no expectations whatsoever. We just did what we do as musicians, which is great. I'm certainly proud of what I did in Rush, but that's not the only music that's going on in my head or the only music that I want to use these for. I'm thrilled with this record, with the variety on it. I'm thrilled with the production, the quality of the songs, the lyrics, like everything about it. It's a nice departure. Certainly for me it is, but there's something that's just really solid about the music and the way it comes across. This record does sound like it's a record done by this particular unit, and it has that consistency all the way through.
Yeah, and Tim, stylistically, I will tell you, like as Alex said, we really didn't set any parameters around, we should write a rock song or we should write a pop song or we should do this and that. The process was sharing ideas, and if somebody got excited about it, we'd run with it, and that didn't matter if it was mellow or trippy or ambient or heavy. I think the further the record got along, maybe we started to, like with a song like Dog's Life, I introduced it very late on, saying, hey, it would be nice to have a brother for Enemy. We have a little companion piece on it. So near the end of the record, we started thinking about maybe tempos, and if the record could use another helping of a rock flavoring. But for the most part, we were just getting off on the ideas and just rolling with it.
It took me on a wild, like 80s new wave adventure meets Pink Floyd at points. You know what I mean? Like it really, and the production, just everything was just there. And I'm a rock guy, but throughout the 80s, I grew up with Depeche Mode and the Smiths, and you know what I mean? I get that feel. Do you get that feel in the studio that it was taking you back to that era?
Well, personally for me, yes, I hear lots of different trimmings of some of that. I think that the electronic part of it, Tim, is probably where that was steering. I purposely didn't play electric bass on a couple of the tracks and decided to go with keyboard bass on it, which immediately, once you start dressing up a song with sounds like that, you can't help but think of those bands that you've mentioned, the Smiths, The Cure, Depeche Mode. But again, I don't think it was intentional, was it, Al? We weren't really trying to go, let's do a new wave song. I think the soundscaping of it might have taken you there. I don't know what your thoughts are, Al.
Yeah, I think maybe the soundscaping might have been a little hint or clue of that direction, but it was never an intentional direction, or we never sat down to write a Cure part or a Depeche Mode song. They just happened the way they happened. And some of the sounds that we used, particularly from keyboard sounds, synth sounds, were more classic sort of sounds. So it's going to naturally give that flavor or seemingly intent. But it was all, to me, it was all very, very fresh.
Fresh and natural?
Yeah, absolutely natural. That's very much the case.
And unlike other records, Tim, that Alex and I would have been involved in, there was no record company involvement. There was no label saying, okay, we're expecting this out of you guys, and this is, and this is where. So that too was liberating. It was literally the four of us guiding the path of this train as it went along. Nobody was weighing in to say, do this or do that.
But now there's a label attached now. What do they think of it? What does Snapper think of this thing? And where can they take it?
Sarah, there you go.
Well, sorry. I think they're very enthusiastic right from the get-go. They were very enthusiastic, and you can tell by the honest enthusiasm over the forced enthusiasm. Right from the start, it wasn't, hey, Far Out album, that's really great. It's gonna be great. We're gonna do so many things. They had very specific ideas. They mentioned songs that they loved that caught us off guard, like Look Inside, for example. We didn't think that would be a favorite of the label, and yet it was. And everything that we've done with the label, it feels like a team effort. Rush was signed to major labels. We never got too close with the label because we never really trusted the label, but we had a good relationship and all of that stuff. But this definitely feels like a team effort. It's a substantial label. They're not a small label, but they act like a small, caring label, which is, for us, is great.
Now, there's a ghost in the room that really embraces the darkness, and that's your singer, Maya. And wow, and not just reading the quotes from the bio, like listen to this whole thing, I'm like, this woman has a really stirring presence on this record. And as I say, it embraces what you guys brought to the table. So the first time you heard that voice, what went through your head?
Well, I'll jump in, Tim, because my first time was passing an idea over to her, the seeds of a song called Shadow that she sang on. And I basically somehow serendipitously met her when I judged an online music talent contest, and she was one of the winners of it. And when I agreed to try to write some songs with her, and when she sent something over, I was immediately blown away with what she did. I passed it on to Alex and said, I really think this girl's special. Would you mind giving it a listen? And if you like it, would you consider playing guitar on it? And he immediately loved her voice, which he can speak about, but so did Alfio. And that was the glue for this entire project. And we've said all along that we felt that she's the star of the show, but Alex would have to answer on his own to what his first thoughts were, but I was just blown away the first time I saw her, and her grasp of melody and harmonies just was amazing.
I would agree with everything that Andy said. After I heard her voice, I don't know, I remember Andy and I talking about this, that now we had all the components to do an album, to do something serious, not just throw around some music just for the fun of it, something to do. We could actually make a record. Yeah. I used Maya for a project that I was working with David, with Marco Miniman, the drummer, and we used Maya's vocal on a particular track that we were working, a 7-minute track of so many changes, but Maya was amazing on it. And I just looked so forward to actually getting into more of our own material with her. Her vocal just seems to sit on top of whatever it is musically that we write, whether it's hard, heavy, menacing, light, whatever it is, it just works so well. She's got great sensibilities as a vocalist. She knows what her limitations are. She knows what her strengths are, and she really works to those things. Very, very mature for a vocalist of her age, I think.
And what about her actually working with two elders of the scene from the hard rock scene? Did she know much about your worlds way back, or?
No, I don't think so. She says that her parents were Rush fans.
Okay.
She's 25 now. We started working with her when she was 20, 21. She Googled Andy to find out who he was. And I don't know if she felt intimidated or anything, or she may have, but this was never like that. This project, maybe because it's been from a distance, we haven't worked in a room together, so she couldn't see how old we were every day. Maybe that made a difference. Because we were, I always felt like we were 4 individuals equal in this project, and whatever it was that we were contributing to the project was our contribution individually. So everybody was an equal member of the unit and worked that way. I hate to think that she would feel intimidated because I had a career in a band for 40 years. Oh my God, that does sound intimidating. Come to think of it. I'm intimidated by that.
But Tim, what Alex said, there was some very innocent, naive. I remember saying the call when I phoned her up to say, hey, I got some really great news for you. Alex has agreed to play a guitar on Shadow, which was the humble beginnings of Envy of None. And just like, she was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I was like, you realize what I just said to you, right? Like, we've got Alex Lifeson from Rush is playing, and she was like, yeah, that's so great. And I think it was just, she's not in the same world that we're on. She's in Portland, Oregon, and she was doing her sort of folk Americana scene, and I don't think it really resonated. I think it did the more the project sort of started taking flight, and people would say, what do you mean Alex is in this project, or my name, or something like that. But I never felt she was intimidated by it, because she was just so, I don't know, green is the wrong word, but she was just, there was no boundaries. Oh, great, I'm working with these guys. Let's just go.
It resonated when she Googled it. That's what you're saying.
Probably, yeah, after the fact,
yeah,
right?
That's it.
Yeah, after her parents told her what the heck was going on.
Exactly. Well, I lean a little heavier, appreciate the era, but I love this term heavy mellow, because it doesn't need to be the heaviest to hit you hard. And that was one takeaway from listening to Envy of None, is just heavy mellow. You know what I mean? It didn't make me go this, it just, whoa, very powerful, and a very personal record on many levels.
There's also a cinematic quality to it. The record sounds very visual when you listen to it. Like Enemy might not be metal, but Enemy is a heavy song, and Enemy has some very heavy, hard rock kind of parts to it. The choruses, the menace that it aspires to. I think it can be satisfying on all those levels for any kind of listener.
I would agree, and I think, Tim, that there's some tracks that are a little bit more immediate when we needed to punctuate that we were getting a little bit nasty. Liar is pretty much in your face from the minute the fuzz bass comes in. There's some pretty dark sounds on Look Inside. There's a dark journey through it all, and I think I have to, flip my hat to Alex on when he wanted to punctuate. When he was, there were lots of times I would say, "Do you want to add heavy guitars to this part?" And he's like, "Nope." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're not going to do that then." So we really picked our moments to flex our muscle, especially Mr. Lifeson. So it was pretty cool to do that, and like we said from the beginning, we never set out to let's write a rock record. If there was rock trimmings on it, then that was fine by us.
Talk to me then about appeasing yourself versus appeasing the people that actually want you to rock, the people that actually got you where you are right now. Is that a debate in your mind, or is it like, fuck it, I'm just going on my own path, and if you like it, jump on board. If not, then see ya.
Well, from my point of view, I came from a band that always wrote for itself first. And we always said that we are the first people that we want to impress with our record. And if other people are interested in it, great, let's all go together. But you have to satisfy yourself, and you have to not worry so much about what other people are going to think. Going into this project, if people don't like it because they were expecting something like Rush, then, go listen to a Rush album. I don't like staying in the same place. It's boring. I just want to keep challenging myself, especially at this state in my life, at this point in my life. I'm excited that I'm still fired up about music, and I want to spend all day in here playing and trying different guitars and different amps and doing all this stuff that I've been doing since I was 12 years old. That to me is so cool. And I frankly, I don't care what anybody thinks about this. I love it. And that's all that's important to me.
Yeah, I would agree too, Tim. And Tim, you and I know each other well enough that if you follow the dotted line on some of the projects that going from Coney Hatch to my solo stuff to Soho to Drug Plan and Leisure World, it got progressively darker and even heavier and stuff like that. So I was never satisfied staying in the same place all the time. And yeah, there are much lighter as cinematic moments on this, but I, like Alex, I enjoy a challenge, and I enjoy trying new things as a musician. So that's the itch that I was scratching on Indian Nun. And yeah, I feel the same way. If you don't like it, no problem. We love it.
Here's a fun question about new music, because you can relate, because we're all from Southern Ontario, and growing up, I would hear new music on like the 6 o'clock rock report or the top 10 at 10. You know what I mean? When it was a special moment. Now it's like, where do you find new music? You know what I mean? Just that's a total general question. I'm lucky. I get way too much new music, but for Joe Public or Jane Public, it's like, where do you guys find new music? Where do you go? Is it YouTube? Is it Spotify? Because it was a lot easier back in the olden days.
It was a lot easier. It was part of the olden days, and now it's all fractured. It's all over the place. We have, a couple more generations since our generation. They think of music differently. They listen to music differently. Everybody listens on little earphones. For the most part, it's not a big stereo system that you spent tons of money on to sit in front of and get blown away by the sound. The time you spend to make a record sound as good as you can is not as important as it used to be. New music comes and goes so quickly. Attention span is so short for most people. It's hard. I've lost interest in looking for music generally, unless I hear about something through the grapevine or my grandkids tell me about something they're listening to. Not that I listen to much of their music, but it's really hard to find stuff that you want to invest your time in.
Isn't it kind of cool though that we all went through that era, and then when you look at the current era and you just look at these kids, I'm like, man, I'm so happy I went through the 8-track, the vinyl, the cassette, that, you know what I mean? Like when radio actually meant something.
I totally agree. Let me just get in here for a second. I totally agree with you. The thing is, and this is the same thing with my parents. I remember my parents telling me, you kids today and your music and your whole lifestyle and everything is so crazy. It's just all messed up. You can't understand words in the music. And this was my parents saying this. I'm thinking, this is the best music ever in the history of mankind. This is the best time to be alive. Now I'm looking at my grandkids and I'm saying the same thing to them. You don't know what it's like. I grew up in the era of music where we all sat and looked at our album jackets and when we were listening to the record, and it was such a great experience. You'll never have that experience. They're thinking, get out of the way, old man. This is our world now. This is the way we do things, and we love it, by the way. So it's all relative, I guess. I agree with you. That was my memory is of so many different aspects of the music industry and how we listen to music and everything.
This thing called video, like the Chum countdown every Saturday night, right?
Yeah,
all this. But you're right too. These young kids are going, screw you. I'm having a great time with loving music right now. The problem is you can't relate to me. So you're right. It's all generational.
Yeah, exactly.
Tim, you brought up something interesting, and Alex even said it there about the attention span. And I've got a couple young daughters, and sometimes when they play me music, they'll put on a song and I'm listening to it and they'll just switch to the next song. I go, wait a sec, we were just 30 seconds in. And they're like, yeah, well, that's what that song sounds, right? That's what that song sounds like. And you're like, well, why? And I would say, are you going to buy the full record? Oh, no, I would never buy the full record. I just want the one song, which doesn't, I don't know. I can't comprehend that. But when Alex there's a couple of songs late on Envy of None, like Spy House and Kabul Blues and even Western Sunset, when Al said, these songs are very short. Like, do we need to make them longer? And I was like, hell no, my daughter can't even get through 30 seconds of music. That 2 minutes is going to be a giant meal for some people, right? So I encourage Alex to not worry about the fact that it was a short snippet. And a couple nights ago, I went to one of my first shows that I had been to in 2 years. I went to see Tame Impala, and in their set, they actually did 2 or 3 songs that I swear to God were 30 seconds long. They were just little electronic pieces, and they finished and the crowd went nuts. So I think this new generation, Gen Z or millennials, they're digesting music in a much different way than the three of us would have, but it's kind of fun to watch,
Talk to me about your working relationship, because you guys have history. Andy, you've worked with Anthem SRO for a long time, so you worked under Alex and the band and everything, or worked for. Talk to me about that whole era and the way you two actually work together.
Okay, well, I'll jump in first. I can tell you that, I was reminding Alex about the very first time that we met, which was very brief, Tim, when Coney Hatch got signed to Anthem Records in 1982, and we started to go out on the road. A kid growing up in Toronto, I saw Rush at Massey Hall when they recorded All the World's a Stage. I went to so many shows at Maple Leaf Gardens. I probably bought a Rickenbacker bass because I loved Geddy's bass playing. So there was a big fanboy in me, and I knew their music intimately, which actually was to my benefit later on, many years later, when I would work closely at the label with them. But in 1982, I looked and I saw, oh my God, we're in, like Wisconsin, and Russia in Wisconsin too. And I called up Ray, our manager, and said, can we meet the guys? And he was like, he arranged it all. So we arrived at the gig, Tim, to meet them. And we were met by Howard Ungerleider, their tour manager. And he said, guys, I got good news for you. I got tickets, but you're not going to meet the band today. They're having French lessons right now. And I was like, French lessons? What the hell did you just say? And and Alex remembers that period, like, of you guys taking French lessons just to kill time on the road, I think, right?
That had to be code for something else. It had to be, right?
We were bored and we were sitting around the dressing room waiting for the show. We'd always go to the gig around 4:00. Sound check would be around 4:30 to 6, and then have dinner. We'd never go back to the hotel. We'd just stay there, and it was boring. So I think it was Neil that had this idea that we do a Berlitz course, language course in French. And we would have a teacher come out, an instructor, and they would spend an hour with us at the gig in the dressing room, going over the French lesson and our homework. And then we would book another one for 2 weeks later, do our homework on the bus, speak French to each other on the, we took it seriously. We thought, hey, why not? Canada's a bilingual country. Let's refresh our French from high school, junior high school, and it's something productive. So we did that. We probably did it for a couple of months, and we had all the books, and within, I don't know, 3 months after, we couldn't speak a word of French. So,
but Tim, let me condense the answer to your. Okay, so that's the very humble beginnings, and I believe after the show we might have met them very briefly and shook hands. Then there was this long period of time where they were touring, I was touring. Fast forward, Coney Hatch is broken up, but Ray Daniels calls me to say, Andy, you've got a solo record out and a Juno Award. It was the Roll the Bones tour, and all of a sudden he said, how would you like to do a bunch of shows with Rush on the Roll the Bones tour? So again, as a kid growing up with Rush, I was like, oh my God, man, my band's going to open up for Rush. This is going to be amazing. Walked into the dressing room at Cops Coliseum, and there was a bottle of champagne and a note from Geddy, Alex, and Neil, welcome to the tour, Andy. And that sums it up right there, how classy these guys have been since the day that I met them. And many years later, after I'd stopped touring, when Ray Daniels asked me to come over and be A&R and help at the label and work on the management side, Alex and I started to work really closely together. I took care of their endorsement partnerships with Gibson and Fender and DW, and traveled out to Vancouver to work with Mike Fraser and Alex on the mixing of Replay 3. So we really started to solidify our friendship there. And it's funny, they never ever treated me like I was their lackey working underneath them. It was always, I think maybe because they knew I was a musician, I was immediately trusted and spoke the language that they spoke. And but I never ever thought I would collaborate on a creative level with any of them. There was a very fine line in there that these guys, I'm part of their management company and their label. So I never approached Alex to write any music with him. Fast forward, as we're now seeing, there was an opportunity to work with them, and I don't think it was forced or anything, Al. I think it just kind of happened pretty naturally, right?
Yeah, very naturally. Yeah. I mean, Andy just called me up and said, listen, I got some bits and pieces of some songs. I wouldn't mind getting some guitar in there. If you're not doing anything, you feel like doing it. So yeah, sure. Let's do that. By the way, what are you doing on Tuesday? We should go grab a beer. It's easy when you're buddies and friends and you're sitting and not doing anything.
And golf got in there. We started playing some golf together. I'm nowhere near as good as Alex is, but if I can get out and play some golf with him, and he was working on a few things and asked me to play bass on it, which I first replied and said, wait a sec, don't you know any other bass players? There's a guy named, his initials are GL. Isn't he on speed dial? You should be calling that guy. And he was like, no, he's writing his book. Come on, play some bass for me. So it happened very naturally and not forced at all. And I've been having a blast doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I got the stoplight, so I really appreciate everything. And I don't know, it's quite the honor.